You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast with your ADHD coach and expert, Zena. Hello, my beautiful, sparkly-brained friend. Welcome back to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast. Today we're talking about something a little bit different, actually, and actually very exciting, I've got to say. I was very excited about this. Because ADHD, it's not just about focus or forgetting your keys, okay? We know that. And there is some new research that has just been released that shows how ADHD medication might actually save lives. This study, this research that has come out is showing how our medication can reduce the risk of suicide, of accidents, substance like misuse, and more. So we're going to break it down together. We're going to explore what this science is saying, what it means for those of us with ADHD in terms of our life expectancy, in terms of like the risks. And also because I know that not everyone either has access to medication, can take it, or wants to take it. We're also going to talk about what else you can do to protect your ADHD brain and live longer, healthier, safer lives. Okay? So ADHD is often framed as like a childhood learning problem. Like it's the naughty little boy at school, can't sit still, disrupts everybody. And it's often kind of seen as more of a problem or a focus in children. But we know it's a lifelong thing, okay? We don't grow out of ADHD, right? Initially, years ago, the experts thought that was the case, but they also only thought that it impacted boys, right? They didn't realize it also impacted girls, women, adults equally as much. So it is something that we live with for our life. We don't grow out of it, right? It's how we're wired. And adults with ADHD are statistically more likely to experience accidents and injuries, okay? We are more likely to experience issues with substance abuse. We are more likely to experience suicide attempts and death, right? Now, these aren't just like abstract numbers, right? The studies that talk about this. These are real life risks that actually can impact our quality of life, right? ADHD can impact how long we live, how that life is, like what our relationships are like, all of it. So until recently, though, we didn't actually have like really strong data showing whether or not medication actually changed these big picture outcomes across our lifespan, okay? Now, we do today, all right? Can you tell I'm like very excited about this? So let's talk about this new study that has got my attention. So there were researchers in Sweden who looked at almost 150,000 people with ADHD, okay? And they ranged in age from age 6 through to age 64. Now, this study took part over 13 years from 2007 to 2020. And instead of just comparing people who took ADHD meds versus people who didn't, right? What they did is they did something quite clever. They compared all of these people, like these 150,000 people, they compared them to themselves. And I'm not talking about like the people who did the research, each individual ADHDer. They compared what happens to that person when they're on medication compared to what happens when they're off it. Okay? And here's what they found. When people with ADHD were on medication, their risk of suicidal behavior dropped by about 17%. That's a lot. Their risk of substance misuse dropped by 15%. Transport accidents went down 12%, right? And criminal convictions were down 13%. Like, this is pretty amazing. And these were not just like one-time events, okay? So the medication also reduced the risk of these things happening again, like, repeated use of substances or like repeated criminal behavior. So these results have held true across all ages, genders, right? Whether it be kids, teens, adults, men, women, everyone benefited when they were on medication. Isn't this incredible? Right? So here's where it gets even more interesting, more powerful. So earlier in 2025, there was a really big study in the UK that looked at the life expectancy of over 30,000 adults who have ADHD, and they compared it to people who don't have ADHD, okay? And these results were pretty sobering, okay? So what this study showed is that men who have ADHD were expected to live almost 7 years less than men without ADHD. And women, it gets worse, my friends. Women with ADHD were expected to live almost 9 years less. Okay, so this study showed that me, as a woman with ADHD, I'm probably going to live 9 years less than my female friends without ADHD. Isn't that wild? Like, that's not a small fucking gap. It's like almost 10 years. Now, the main drivers of this, this age difference, our life expectancy difference, are not things like random disease or cancer, okay? They are preventable things, right? So it's the increase in our death rate is caused by things like accidents, suicide, substance-related issues, and untreated health conditions, right? So when you put these two studies side by side, like one that shows, hey, people with ADHD are proven, it is shown that we will have shorter life expectancies, right? And the other study that shows, hey, medication can reduce the exact risks that create that gap, kind of gives us a little bit of hope, right? Like, it's a pretty fucking positive thing, right? Maybe ADHD meds don't just help us focus, maybe they actually save years of our lives. Like, insert the little mind-blowing emoji, okay? So a couple of things I do want to mention, like, before we go shouting it from the rooftops, right? This study was observational, okay, and not like a randomized controlled trial, okay? So what that means is, like, they can't like officially say for certain that meds caused these improvements, but I think like it's pretty safe to assume that, right? And it is still incredibly compelling, okay? Now, medication, I do want to point out, it's only one part of the picture. Like I talk about, like, it is a tool. Medication is a tool. And if you have access to it, if you're able to take it, that's fantastic, right? Therapy, coaching, lifestyle changes, emotional regulation tools, all of those things matter too, right? And I do want to acknowledge that I know not everyone has access to equal treatment, right? There are all across the world, like, diagnosis delays. I spoke to somebody in the UK who said in order to try and go through the private system so that it wasn't costing them thousands and thousands of pounds, they had to wait up to 8 years, right? So there are huge delays. There is a huge cost involved in getting diagnosed in many, many countries, right? Especially here in New Zealand, I know it can literally cost thousands, right? There is stigma in not only the label of having ADHD, but also in taking medication. There is real stigma attached to that, right? Now, all of that plays a role in whether someone can actually get medication as a form of support or as a tool, right? And of course, there are medical considerations, right? Some people cannot take stimulant-based medication. For some people, it can raise blood pressure or heart rate. It's funny as I say that, though, and I know, like, this is unique to each of us, right? I'm not a doctor, you all know that. But I was literally on a coaching call with a client yesterday who had had an operation and wasn't allowed to have her stimulant medication for a short period of time. And they wanted her blood pressure to go back down, and her blood pressure had been affected by like the anesthesia and different things over the course of this operation she'd had to have. And when she took her stimulant medication, her blood pressure actually went down. Right? She was experiencing more anxiety and a higher rate of blood pressure on the days like when she couldn't take it. And it was just so fascinating to her to notice that, because she had to take it and keep a record of it every day. Right? So again, this is super unique to each of us. Right? To my non-medication friends, okay, I also want to pause here and acknowledge for those of you who are thinking, well, I don't take medication. I'm still waiting for my appointment to get diagnosed, or I can't take it, or I just don't want to take it. Okay? All of that is completely okay, right? Medication is just one tool in the ADHD toolbox. It's not the only one, right? And it's also not the right fit for everyone. So maybe you have had side effects. Maybe your doctor advised you against it, or maybe you just don't feel comfortable taking meds. Maybe you will re-explore that decision after this episode and this study, right? Maybe not, right? Even if you choose not to, completely valid. The bigger takeaway here is that ADHD itself, right, is proven to carry risks. But there are lots of other ways that we can reduce those risks. Okay? Therapy or coaching, or both, right? I'm personally a fan of both, right? I do both, right? Learning emotional regulation strategies, literally life-changing. Like, I wish this shit was taught in schools, right? Regular exercise and movement, prioritizing sleep, stress management, right? Cutting back on substance use, right? Building a supportive community. All of these things help protect your health and your future too. And honestly, medication works way better when it is paired with those other tools. So I also do want to mention that a shout out to all of my fellow Kiwis listening here in New Zealand. We had some good news recently, which I don't think I've mentioned on the podcast. And there are changes happening here in New Zealand to the ADHD diagnosis process and how medication will be prescribed. So from February of 2026, right? So technically, as I record this, that's next year. It's only a few months away. Certain GPs who are trained in this and practicing, I believe, under a psychiatrist, they will be able to diagnose ADHD and prescribe. So it'll be GPs and nurse practitioners who have been trained, okay? So what that means is getting access to a diagnosis, getting access to medication is going to become much easier and much more cost-effective, shall we say, as of February 2026, right? Like, we're not going to have the months and months of waiting lists. And, I've heard stories of people literally selling a car, right? Like saving up for months and months and months to be able to afford to pay for this appointment because they're really desperate to get answers and to know, what's going on. So this is huge progress. This is such fantastic news here in New Zealand, and I know Australia has already done this in many states, and I hope other places around the world follow suit, right? So that those who have been struggling, right, with this current system can get that support faster. Now, if you, my friend, are new to ADHD medication, please remember it takes time. It takes time to find the right medication for you, the right dosage, okay? And I always say give it a good 12 months to figure this out, all right? And I know patience is not generally one of the things that we are very good at, speaking from experience, but I promise that this is so worth it. It took me, I would say, just over 12 months. Right. And so many of, the coaching clients I've had the honor of supporting, the ADHD people in the community that I know, it has taken them a good 12 months. This seems to be about the average, right? There is a lot of learning what works for your brain and body and what doesn't, right? It takes time to see some of the side effects come out. It takes time to see, whether or not you have a really strong response or reaction as it comes out of your system. Are you better with something short, or are you better with something that lasts a full day? Okay, it really is a lot of learning and experimenting alongside your medical professionals, right, as you do this. Now, I talk a lot about meds because I don't think it's necessarily talked about enough. I talk about, the different types of ADHD medication available. I share my own personal lessons. I talk about, how I track different things to know what's working, what's not working. So I've got multiple episodes. You can check out episodes number 3 and 50, where I talk about, the different types of meds, my lessons, etc. Episode number 111, I talk about how I get the most out of my medication. So I talk about the things that I do, especially lifestyle-wise, to really maximize my meds, okay? And then in episode 117, I talk about how to know whether or not the meds are working for you, whether they're right, okay? Because I get so many questions about that. So again, if you get the cheat sheet for this episode, right, I link to all of those. I'll link to the studies that I've talked about here if you want to check those out as well. If you head to navigatingadultadhd.com/cheat sheet, right, I'll give you a free one-page recap of this episode, and it'll give you those links so that you can click on them and go straight to them, because let me guess, you've probably forgotten those numbers already. I literally have them written down so that I didn't forget them. All right, so my friend, that link is in the show notes to hook you up. Now, I also want to acknowledge that ADHD medication can get a bad rap, okay? It has been misused and abused by plenty of people who don't even have ADHD, right? Usually for things like pulling all-nighters, studying at night, staying awake, chasing a high, all of that kind of shit, right? And unfortunately, that's how a lot of non-ADHD people see our medication, as a party drug or a shortcut or some sort of a high, right? But that is not the reality for those of us with ADHD, right? For people with ADHD, these medications are literally life-changing, okay? And now, thank you to this new research, we can say they're not just life-changing, they're actually life-saving, okay? Proven to reduce serious risks and even to close that life expectancy gap that us adults with ADHD have. So my friend, whether medication is part of your journey or not, right, the takeaway is this: ADHD support matters hugely, right? The right help, whether it is, medication, coaching, therapy, community, or lifestyle tools, right? It doesn't just make day-to-day life easier for us. It can actually give us more life to live. And my friend, you deserve that, right? You deserve to feel better. You deserve to be able to actually follow through, to be able to get shit done, and to stick around for as long as possible. All right, my friend, that is a wrap. Huge love. Take care. I'll speak to you next week. Hey friend, if you want some more help navigating and thriving with ADHD and some help applying everything that you're learning here on the podcast, then head over to our website, navigatingadultadhd.com.